the idea of smart grids. And during the presentation, please feel free to ask questions. I hope to round it up within 20 to 25 minutes. Sometimes it moves a bit over, but I will do my best. My next slide is one of the most important thing I would like you to take home today. So if you don't understand the next slide, please halt me, because if you miss it, it's going to be a relatively challenging to follow through. It will come back when I'm almost running up. So let's go. I'm going to tell you about what I call the tale of electrical energy. There's something unique with electricity system. Three things that are quite unique with the electrical energy infrastructure or the electricity network is that the first thing is that electricity always have to be it's always a converted energy form, which means that you will not find it in the raw form as electricity. So it is always in a different form. So you need conversion. So you will see that what is used to produce electricity determines how clean or otherwise it is. So we have several forms of things to convert to electricity. So you can get it from hydropower, you can get it from coal, you can get it from wind or solar, or you can get it from all the nuclear and the oil and gas something. So you will see that electricity is not a primary form of energy. It is always a converter. It's just an energy carrier. You always need conversion. That is very important. So mark that. The second point is that when it is converted to electricity, normally or usually where the conversion takes place is not where the energy is used. So you will need to transport. So you will see that the big power plants, some of them are in the north of Netherlands, some of them are in the east, west, far away from the residents. So you need to transport it. And that's why you need a transportation system, which we call the electricity grid or the network. So you need to transport it from where it is produced to where the people will need it. That is number two. Number three is that normally electricity is not always, you can get a lot at a point in time, but you will not, it is not a constant, it's not constant, it keeps varying, which means that sometimes, for example, the wind is going to blow a lot and you produce a lot of energy, but then the people don't need that energy at that time. They might need it later. So you will need a form of storage, which means that you have to get a backup to know that when people need it, I produce it. And when they don't need it, I can store. And how do you store it? You can store it in the form of the original conversion energy. That means that if it is coal, that is helping you to produce the electricity, then you need a lot of coal as your storage. The same thing with hydro, you need a lot of water as your storage. Or you can also store it in electromechanical form, like in batteries or acus. So electricity also need a form of storage so that when it is needed, you can easily give it. And when you have excess, you can put up, you can store it. Maybe the next slide is this one, because this is very, very crucial. One other thing that makes electricity unique is what we say that demand and supply must always balance. That is one property of electricity. It means that when people need electricity, it is produced at that same time. So electricity, it is called demand driven. Put it this way. When you switch on your light, or you switch on your fridge, or you switch on your television, or you iron, you are using the iron or your dishwasher or whatever, the moment you switch it on, you are taking electricity. At that same time, we need to produce more, because the demand, if you look at this figure here, if the L is for load and the G is for generation, which means that this wheel has to always turn at 50 hertz, which is like the frequency. And the demand is always trying to slow down the wheel, and the generation tries to speed up the wheel. And all the time, this wheel should be at 50 hertz, which means that when the load is increasing, you need to generate more. And when the load is decreasing, people are not taking, you need to reduce it. This picture is very, very crucial for electricity network. So you cannot, you just produce what is consumed. And if they don't need it, you don't produce it. That is very unique because most of the things we consume in our world, they produce it in a lot, it is stored in the warehouse, and then you can distribute them the distribution center or in a supermarket or wherever or shops. They are there, and after some time, if people are not don't need them, we can throw them away. Electricity is not like that. When people need it, it is produced at that same time. So it's an instantaneous system. This property of electricity makes it quite difficult how to handle it. So 3 things: conversion is needed, transportation is needed, and a form of storage. That is the tail. And the second thing is that demand and supply should always balance. They go at the same time. If one goes higher than the other, there will be a problem. And that's why some of you might have been aware. The frequency is also used to control the clock system of Europe. So the clock and the train stations and the clock you use, all these are controlled by the frequency system. And what happens is that if your frequency goes higher, your clock goes faster. If the frequency is low, the clock is lower. So you have it late in your time. So we always try as much as possible to ensure that it's going to be at 50 hertz. So that is very important. The next thing is this. Then how is it transported to us? So this is a very traditional system of how electricity used to be transported.
Ballard, I have a question.
Yes.
Are there different countries with different systems of hertz, 50 or 100 hertz?
Yeah, very good. Most of Europe, or let's say all of Europe, use 50 hertz. The US, the United States, use 60 hertz. And also Brazil, part of also South America also use 60 hertz. Part of Europe, for example, the rail system for Germany, that one uses a different frequency, 16 to hertz, 16 to over 3 hertz. And the reason they did that was to ensure that it's good for the train for traction, but also to avoid people stealing electricity from the rail network. Because if most of the devices will not work if the frequency is not 50 hertz.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, so here is, in this picture, you will see that the classical electricity generation is produce it a lot because there's what we call economy of scale. So if you have a large production, the price will go down. So normally or usually, even to today, this system is still the most dominant form. So you produce in large quantities, and this is where you have all the nuclear, all the coal, all the gas, and all the big power plant producing a lot of electricity. Then it is transported through the overhead lines, which most of you see. In the Netherlands, we have a distribution network, which are normally cables, so they are under the ground, so mostly you cannot see. And then it is distributed either to offices or to our homes and the rest. So this way of production is very, very well tested. It has been there for many years. It's tried and tested. People know how it works. The good thing is that it's in one direction, so you can always follow it. This is how it used to be, and we loved it. Nobody complained until then. And why people started complaining, I will tell you why. So the grid it doesn't need to think a lot. So when I talk of the grid, I'm talking about the transportation system. So when energy is produced, the network that carries it from the generation all the way to the consumer, that is the grid. That's the electricity grid. That is what is transporting the system. And here you have a lot of components which I would all be able to have transformers that are changing the voltage levels to higher voltages, and some of them bringing it to lower voltages so that it will be safe for us to use at home. So this is the general electricity network working very fine. Now, these 3 systems, the sources, that is a generation, the transmission, that is the one that carries large amount, and then the distribution is the one that brings it to our home. These 3 systems are always present in the electricity network. And Every power system having these three connections, they know how it works. Before, all these three, the one that will produce electricity, the transmission, and the distribution, all these were done by one company. So one company does everything from generation itself all the way to the customer, and he collects the money from every one of us. And that one has also changed, and I'll come to that. So what then is this power system? Why was it so necessary? One thing I want you to know about this electricity system is that it's one of the most expensive investments on this planet. Electricity network costs billions and billions of euros. In fact, when they have to build one offshore wind platform, it's a lot of euros going down. So it's really expensive network. Another thing is this, that when electricity network has a problem, everybody suffers with it. So now most of you are connected with internet and the rest. Well, if the network is down, maybe you can use another, you can use your phone, you can create hotspot from your phone and the rest. That is okay. But when the electricity network goes down, I think that is the end of our lecture for today. It disrupts everything. When it goes down, airport, trains, everything goes down. So you see that electricity has really influenced our lives. And if it goes down, it affects every one of us. The other side of it is that if you see those high towers, high tension or high voltage towers moving all around the nation, most people don't like it because it destroys the landscape. So that is a problem. Not only that, the generation, if you have been to where we produce electricity, you see that there's always smoke going in the air. If you have been to the Maasvlakte in Rotterdam, or you've been to Eemshaven in the north of Netherlands, you see that it's always smoke in the air. Or in the areas of Amsterdam or Geertruidenberg, somewhere there, you see that it pollutes the environment. So people are not happy with electricity, especially if it is nuclear. Then yes, there's a problem with radiology. So people are not happy with pollution because of the rays. So what do? What we've seen is that because of all these reasons, we checked and we saw that, number one, the present electricity system has a limitation. So there are connections between Netherlands and Germany, and the Netherlands and Belgium, Netherlands and Norway, Netherlands and United Kingdom. And that connection has a maximum. Once the maximum has reached, there's nothing you can do to it. So that's a limitation. Another key limitation which needed a change is that what I showed you, I was always mentioning coal, nuclear, and those things. That was the original idea of production. The existing power system or the traditional power system didn't take into account renewables or how wind is going to be integrated, how solar is going to be. That was not our cup of tea. We just thought, let's produce bulk and distribute. So now that these ones are coming on board, how are they going to affect the grid? That is something we have to look at. The third one, as I mentioned, was the unbundling of the system. The electricity system has to be unbundled. So not one person is doing generation, transmission, and everything. It has not been divided among many. And the last two are more important. Now, at first, we could predict how people will use electricity because they were only consuming. At the moment, it's not the case. People are putting solar panels on their roofs. So it's very difficult to know the amount of energy people will use at the moment. So that makes it difficult to balance the generation and the demand and the supply. The last one is that people no longer like the coal and the oil and the gas. So they said they should be shut down. So that also creates a big of a problem. So how should the power system adapt to these changes? So the challenge is, this one is what I just mentioned. The global warming is one problem because the electricity is very polluted. I'll show you. The generation is very polluted, so people are not happy. And then we have to look at what is going on. Let me give you this picture. Here in the United States, this is a picture of the US. It's not so different from Europe, and especially for Netherlands, even this picture might be a little bit worse because Netherlands is really a fossil-based country when it comes to electricity production. Most of it is coming from the gas and the coal and the oil. You will see that if this is the total CO2 emission, that electricity and transportation, they carry about 73 to 75%. So most of the pollution we are facing in our world is coming from electricity and transportation. So if you really want to be sustainable, then look at these two areas very well. make sure that the transport system is clean and the electricity generation is clean. If you can do these two, you have solved 3/4 of the problem of pollution, at least for now. And that is why this issue is really pressing. And let's show, so if you look at the environmental target, I think most of you are aware of this. It was from Kyoto to EU to Copenhagen and many, many things from 1997 until the last one, which is 2017, which is the Paris Agreement. And the main goal is we want to slow down emissions. And as I showed you, if you want to slow down emissions, then tackle electricity and tackle transportation. This picture tells you the story. You will see that indeed electricity is about 20% of the global energy we use. 32% of the energy is for transportation. And a large chunk of our energy use is heat, especially in the industry. So if you really want to transform the energy system, energy transition, then what should you do? Make sure that you can bring renewables or make sure every sector is green. And the way Europe or the world is pushing now is that, okay, let's do two things. Let's make sure we expand the electricity network, make sure that transport and heat will all be electrified. So we call it deep electrification. So that's why you see that a lot of electric vehicles, a lot of electric cars are coming. We have heat pumps trying to replace the conventional CVKs we have at home, because we want to replace most of the heating system, make it electric, and also most of the transportation system, make them electric. The question is, why would they want to do that? Because we just saw that electricity is very polluting, and yet they want to go all electric. Two things. One thing is that you can do almost everything with electricity, and that's very good. So you have one thing that can do all. Electricity can help you with mobility. Electricity can also heat. So you can see that whether in agriculture, transport, or built environment or industry, electricity is everywhere. Even now, it's coming closer to our homes. You see that the natural gas heating is going to be electric. The hot water will be electric. Even cooking is going electric. So you see, there is a push. Transportation, as I mentioned, e-bike, electric cars, electric motorbikes, everywhere is all electric. That is one. Another reason is this. You can integrate renewables easily into the electricity network. So if you have wind or solar or biomass, these are renewable. It is easier to integrate these into the electricity than any other form. So the idea is, let's make sure that wind, solar, biomass, they grow very rapidly, and then they can then replace all these other conventional, all this solar, all this coal and the rest. Then if we can do that, then we use this electricity to heat our homes. We use it for our cars. So the idea is produce more electricity and make sure that the production is renewable, and then use it to supply all your needs. But there is something they didn't think about. What will happen to the transportation system? If you are producing so much with electricity, what happens to the electricity grid, the network, which before just transport to the customers? And that is where I come back to the first thing I showed you. That's the first problem you will see, is that to balance demand and supply will be a big problem. Because before you had hydro power and nuclear and those ones, you can easily increase or reduce it when the demand is changing. But if you bring in wind and solar, what you see that the sun is not always shining and the wind is not always blowing. So how are you going to balance your demand and your supply? That is a big question. So those conventional power systems, nuclear and coal and the rest, they are still needed until we are able to find a real solution for this balancing problem. Another reason is, look at the grid. Now, this was what I showed you at the beginning. So I'll come back. Very simple. Energy was flowing from the large production coming all the way to the houses. Everything was okay. There is no congestion. Everything was flowing until things changed. And now we have wind coming in, we have solar coming in, people generating energy at the houses and in industries, which originally were not supposed to be so. And because of this generation at home and at industry, it is creating a bi-directional. So now energy can flow back from your home to the grid, which was not supposed to be original. Another thing you see is that the grid now gets too congested. So the cables will become overheated, the transformers become hot. So now the grid is now really stretched. And that is why we need a smarter grid. We need a grid that is smarter than what it used to be. That is the origin of this so-called smart grid. To make the grid smarter so that it can now handle these changing things that are happening in our world. This one you can read. So that is it. That is the hype about smart grid. So and everything, the electrification made a smart grid. What does it mean? So all that we are saying with smart grid is that at first the grid was just transporting energy to people, but now the grid has to be smart. It has to be able to intelligently integrate everyone connected to it. So people are generating, people are consuming, people are doing both generation and consumption. The grid should now think before it reacts. It should not just do what it used to do, only transporting from generation to the people, but now it should be able to do both. And to do that very efficiently, should be very economic, and it should be secure. So how will the grid do this? And why are they pushing for this in Europe? The reason is very simple. You can have this slide to read, but the most important reason is number C. C is to integrate renewable energy generation sources. That is one of the reasons why smart grid is really needed. We want more renewables, and we need a grid that can help us do that. You see, TenneT built, I think 2 weeks ago, a big offshore wind farm at Borsele Beta, very big in Zeeland there. And they are going to build a lot of offshore wind farm for the Netherlands. And when the wind blows, a lot of energy comes into the grid, and sometimes it chokes the grid. So you need a grid that is smart to handle these. People are generating a lot of energy at home, and they are creating problems. So, rounding up the last part. So, what is smart grid then? Number one, this is the first picture. I always come back to this. I showed you. Energy was produced centrally. It came down to us at home. Everybody was happy. It was easy, one direction. Now we move to this one to the right here, which is really complicated. It's not a mesh network. The generation is not all at the same place. It can be in your home, it can be somewhere, they can be central, and load is almost scattered all over. So it is really difficult to manage the grid this way, the meshed grid, than the other grid. So we need something to help us. First is the electrical infrastructure, which I showed you from the beginning. Then we need an intelligence to think for the grid, something to make it smart. And when you bring the grid and intelligence together, that's where you get smart grid. So smart grid simply means that take the physical grid, put intelligence on top of it, measure. That's why you have smart meters coming to the homes, that we can measure what is happening at the residential level, because at first we didn't care, we were only consuming, but now no, they are also producing, so we have to care. So many things are changing, so now we measure a lot, and based on what we have measured, we will be able to take smart decisions to know that, hey, something is wrong here. And that's also what happens actually on our roads. So on the road, they are able to measure and know that there's congestion on A2 or 850. And then if you are using TomTom, he will try to direct you in a different route. So the same concept you have to bring into the grid to be able to let energy flow the various levels. I'm going to show you some few applications, how this is being implemented in our world today. This is an example in Breda. I think most of you know it. And in Breda, what they did was that there was a street of houses having solar panels on their roof, and they gave them smart washing machine. And then they said, okay, and they gave them what we call energy prices. They said, okay, at 2 o'clock, the price of energy is maybe 50 cents, let's say 20 cents. And now you will see that, hey, your solar panel is producing a lot of energy. And now you see that, oh, you have so much to wash. So all that they did was, okay, let's make sure that the time the dishwasher, the washing machine will come on, it will be the time that I have so much energy produced at home. So the washing machine was very smart. So they just put in their clothes and everything in the washing machine, and then they leave it. And then when there is so much sun, like today, it's so bright, so beautiful, then when there is so much energy, immediately the washing machine starts. So the energy they produce is consumed locally. And the advantage is that then it doesn't come back to the grid to cause congestion. So if you can make the demand and the supply, remember the balancing I started with, if you can balance it now at the homes, at the companies, if demand and supply can be balanced locally, then it helps the grid. So this is what they did there. Another thing is also here in Hoogdalen. Here, rather, they gave them acute. So they said, okay, if you have too much energy produced, get an acute at home, store the energy when you are not there. When you come back home, you can use it. So they have this in-home system, and some of you know the Tesla Powerwall is coming. All these are introduced to ensure that we don't send too much energy back to the grid. Another project here in Eindhoven is that electric vehicles, they are really taking a lot of power. And in Eindhoven, in Stripe S, where Philips is, there's a project where they are putting actives there. And what happens is that when the cars are there, they charge from the grid, but they also have an accu so that when the cars are not there, they can store extra energy in the accu. And when the cars come back, instead of all the cars taking energy from the grid, they can now give the energy from the accu to those cars. And then it helps you that the energy you produce locally, you can then store it and use it locally. And the last one I want to show you is this one in Haarlemmermeer. Haarlemmermeer, they have about 35 houses, and all of them, they had this solar panel. What happened was that in a day, most people are working, and you see a lot of energy produced at home coming into the grid. And this created a big problem for the grid. So what they did was to put neighborhood battery there, the huge battery, so that when you are not there, all the energy collected in this neighborhood is stored in the battery, as you can see over here. And when they come back, well, then it is distributed back to people. But of course, here you need some intelligence. You have to measure how much each house, how much energy was coming from each of these houses and how much energy they are using, so that you are fair, that the one who put a lot of energy in there gets a lot back, and the one who is consuming a lot pays for it. So you need some intelligence to also measure to know how each of the houses are. And the last one most of you have heard is called power to gas. I told you that we need storage in electricity. The sun and the wind, there's the energy in the wind and the sun, they are enough to supply all our energy needs. The only thing is that when the sun is shining like this, we cannot collect all the energy and use it. So we need something to store it. And now another reason is, what if all the energy coming from the wind and the sun, we can use electrolysis to produce hydrogen. And then this hydrogen can then be stored. So all that you are doing is, instead of using the natural gas and the rest, produce hydrogen from the sun and the wind. And then this hydrogen you can give to the industries, they can produce, they can use it, or you can give to the cars, some cars can run on hydrogen, or you can use the hydrogen to produce electricity again, or use the hydrogen to produce heat. So then you have moved from renewable to the demand, instead of just always converting everything to electricity. And this helps the electricity grid also, because you need something to store the energy. And hydrogen is now seen as one of the key energy carriers that can help the electricity grid, so that it can store energy when needed. And so with all that is going on, thinking with the grid, storage using hydrogen, we hope that the grid of the future can be run, that neighborhoods can now do a lot. Heat pumps can come to the neighborhoods, electric cars can come to the neighborhoods. A lot of people can go all electric, because we can get the energy from wind and solar, and we can use either normal batteries or hydrogen, or we can even store it in the form of heat storage, using heat pumps as one of the conversion means. And if we do that, then the grid is smarter and the future is much brighter, because we use more of renewables. That's the only way we can go quicker out of the coal and the oil. Otherwise, those conventional power plants are not going anywhere soon. Thank you very much. Attention. I wish you all the best in your studies. Back to you, Mick. Thank you. Except there are questions.
Ja, bedankt. Zijn er vragen? Heeft iemand vragen? Als je, Ballard, een vraagje van mij weer.
Yes.
Als je nou kijkt naar de productie van zonnepanelen en je zegt we gaan all electric. En we weten dat de zonnepanelen eigenlijk alleen maar in de zomer en slechts als de zon schijnt in de winter wat elektriciteit produceren. Hoeveel heb je dan nodig om zo'n jaar energieverbruik te storagen op de bergen?
Yes, that's why I started with my 3 things. That's one of the biggest problems with renewables. That they are not like the coal you can store, or they are not like maybe the oil or the gas you can really store. They are nature dependent. And so how do we cross the seasonal things? It is one of the biggest research. And I think that's why most people are looking to hydrogen as an alternative.
Yeah, okay.
So what you try to do is, if you have a lot of sun, a lot of wind, produce hydrogen from them. And then during the winter, and then where you don't have those things, then you can use the hydrogen as your energy system. So that is one other way you're trying to build the season. Another thing is also someone looking at thermal storage. I know one company involved in that. So they try to, when it's summertime, to store a lot of heat on the ground in water. And then during the winter, they can use those heat to heat the homes, whilst they store the cold during the winter, and they use that cold to cool the buildings during summertime. So those are some things being done. But the point is, to do that, you need a lot of space, a lot of volumes to store the energy, which is...
Yes, in the village parts of Spijkerkwartier, it's that possible to get so much storage from...
Yes, it's one of, it was actually,
in the middle of the city, is it? Eh?
Yeah.
It's very crowded there.
Yes. So I think in Spijkerkwartier, that I know that project actually is one of the things it was planned to do that, if possible, to have a neighborhood storage system, especially for heat. That is quite complicated doing that. The reason is you need a lot of land space, and also the heating system, the company that was involved, the business case also have to support it. Sometimes it's very expensive doing this, and then people are not willing to pay for that. So in terms of technology, it's possible. But for now, some of the technologies are still expensive for the customers. So we will still need to wait a little bit to get technologies that are relatively affordable to implement this. But they are there, and that's what research we are involved now, trying to help think with companies what kind of technology that is good enough, but also affordable for the clients. So yes, you can use it in Spijkerkwartier, but the cost will be another thing.
Ja, een maand. Yes. Bedankt voor je presentatie. Zijn er nog andere vragen? Dan wil ik iedereen bedanken en dan zet ik de opname stop. En Ballard, in ieder geval bedankt voor jouw uitleg. Ik vond het weer interessant en het was goed te volgen.
Oh, thank you very much. Happy to know that you could follow.
Okay,
so
nice.
Then, thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.